Chief Uche's lips curled into a crooked smile. He took another long drag from his cigar before answering. "You'll make me happy, Amara. And part of making me happy means spending time with my dogs every night." Amara's brow furrowed in confusion. "Your dogs, sir?" "Yes, my dogs," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're very special to me. Loyal, obedient, and they get lonely at night. You'll keep them company." Her stomach turned, the meaning behind his words sinking in slowly but surely. The sound of a woman's angry voice echoed through the small living room of an old bungalow in a Jau estate, Lagos. Mama Amara, a stout woman in her late 50s, sat on a rickety wooden chair, her face lined with years of struggle and disappointment. Her headscarf was askew, and her wrapper hung loosely around her waist as she banged her hand on the armrest. "You are all useless children," she shouted, her voice rising above the occasional crack of thunder outside. The rain battered the zinc roof, but it wasn't loud enough to drown her frustration. "After all the suffering I went through to raise you, none of you wants me to enjoy the fruit of my labor." Her eldest daughter, Amara, stood in the corner, clutching her crying child, a boy of about 2 years, close to her chest. The toddler's wails filled the room, but Mama Amara didn't seem to care. She pointed an accusing finger at her daughter, her voice dripping with venom. "Amara, you went all the way to Ibadan to be a surrogate mother, eh? I warned you. I told you it would not end well, but you refused to listen. Now look at you, abandoned with this child after the man died and the wife ran away. Who asked you to bring this burden back to my house, eh?" Amara's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Her once vibrant eyes, now clouded with shame and regret, avoided her mother's piercing gaze. She adjusted her loose, faded gown and tried to soothe her son, Kalechi, who clung to her like a lifeline. Mama Amara wasn't done. She rose to her feet, her large frame casting a shadow over Amara. "What kind of curse is this, eh? All my children, useless. Your brother Abuka dropped out of school, and your sister Nkichi can't even find a decent job. And now you, the one I thought was my hope, you brought disgrace to this family." Amara felt her throat tighten. "Mama, I thought I was helping. They promised me a better life, money to take care of you and the family. How was I to know—" "Shut up!" Mama Amara cut her off, her voice sharp enough to slice through steel. "Better life? Look at the life you brought back. A child you cannot feed, a child whose father is dead and whose mother has disappeared. How do you expect me to take care of all this, eh? Am I the one who told you to do it?" The weight of her mother's words crushed Amara's spirit. She looked down at her son, who had stopped crying but buried his face in her chest. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I didn't know this would happen, Mama. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know!" Mama Amara snapped, her tone dripping with mockery. "You're always acting without thinking. Now I'm left to carry the shame. Do you think people haven't been talking? Do you think they don't know what you did in Ibadan?" Amara wanted to speak, to defend herself, but what could she say? Her mother was right. She had acted out of desperation. When she met Mr. and Mrs. Okoro in Ibadan, they had seemed so kind, so generous. They promised her millions in exchange for carrying their child. She thought it was a blessing, a way to lift her family out of poverty. But the dream turned into a nightmare when Mr. Okoro suddenly died in an accident, and his wife disappeared a week later, leaving her alone with the child. Mama Amara turned away and muttered under her breath, "Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I didn't raise you well. But God knows I tried. I did everything for you children, and this is how you repay me." As the rain poured outside, the tension inside the house hung heavy in the air. Amara knew the road ahead would be hard, but she also knew she couldn't give up, not for herself, and not for her son. The next day, Amara was outside, crouched by the wooden basin filled with soapy water. The morning sun peeked through the dense clouds, but her thoughts were far darker. Kelechi sat nearby on an old mat, playing with a broken plastic cup, giggling at nothing in particular. His laughter was the only bright spot in Amara's world, a sound that gave her strength to keep going, despite the constant tension with her mother. A gust of wind suddenly swept through the compound, scattering leaves and dust. Amara shielded her eyes and grumbled, "This wind won't let me rest today." As she reached for another piece of clothing, a crumpled newspaper tumbled across the yard, landing right at her feet. She picked it up absent-mindedly, intending to throw it into the fire pit later. But as she glanced at the faded print, a bold headline caught her eye. "Chief Uche seeks house help. Attractive pay offered." Amara's hands froze. Her eyes scanned the ad beneath the headline. It read, "Looking for a hard-working and honest young woman to assist with household chores. Generous monthly salary and accommodation provided. Contact Chief Uche at Enquo Village." The thought of leaving her son behind, or worse, taking him with her to a new place, filled her with dread. She crumpled the paper, ready to toss it aside, but then hesitated. What choice did she have? Amara sighed deeply, her hands trembling as she folded the newspaper and slipped it into her wrapper. She finished washing in silence, her mind racing with possibilities. That night, after putting Kelechi to bed, Amara sat alone on the mat in the corner of the living room. She unfolded the paper, smoothing out its wrinkles as she read the ad again. Chief Uche was a well-known name even in their village, a wealthy businessman who owned several properties and was rumored to be generous to those who worked for him. But Amara also knew that working in someone else's house came with its risks. Stories of maids being mistreated or accused of theft were not uncommon. She stared at Kelechi, who was fast asleep, his small chest rising and falling rhythmically. What if this is my way out? She thought, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper. Her mother's words from the day before rang in her ears. "Don't think you'll sit in this house eating and doing nothing." Amara clenched her fists. "I have to try," she whispered to herself, "for Kelechi." She folded the paper neatly and tucked it under her pillow. Tomorrow, she would find a way to get to Enquo Village and see if Chief Uche's offer was genuine. Amara stood in the kitchen, nervously wringing her hands. She had been rehearsing how to ask her mother for money all morning, knowing full well it wouldn't be easy. Mama Amara was in the living room, sorting through a pile of dried beans, her stern expression unchanging as Amara approached. "Mama," Amara began, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama Amara didn't look up. "What is it now? Don't tell me you've come to beg for food again." Amara swallowed her pride. "Mama, I need to borrow some money, just a little. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can." At this, Mama Amara paused and looked up, her brows furrowing. "Borrow? Amara, where do you think I get money from? Do you think I pluck it from a tree?" Amara knelt down beside her mother, her hands clasped. "Please, Mama, I saw a job ad in the paper. Chief Uche is looking for a house help in Enquo Village. If I get the job, I'll send money home every month. I just need money for transport to get there." Mama Amara burst into laughter, the kind that dripped with scorn. "Look at this girl. So after all your foolishness in Ibadan, you still have the guts to come and ask me for money? Ha! Amara, you're not serious." "Mama, please." Amara's voice broke and tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm trying to make things better for Kelechi, for all of us. I promise I'll pay you back." Mama Amara eyed her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "You're lucky I'm a mother with a soft heart. If not for that child, I wouldn't give you a single kobo." She reached into her wrapper and pulled out a few crumpled Naira notes. "Take this, and don't come crying to me if that Chief Uche of yours turns out to be trouble." Amara took the money with shaking hands. "Thank you, Mama. I won't disappoint you." "Don't thank me," Mama Amara said sharply. "Just make sure you don't disgrace this family again." The next day, Amara found herself standing in front of a massive iron gate in Uche village. Her breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight of the luxurious mansion beyond. The house was painted in pristine white, with tall pillars and large glass windows that gleamed in the sunlight. The compound was sprawling, with neatly trimmed hedges, a fountain, and cars parked in the driveway. This wasn't like anything she had ever seen in her village. It was a paradise, but there was something strange about it, a sense that it was too perfect, too artificial. The gate was slightly ajar, so Amara hesitated before pushing it open. She stepped inside cautiously, clutching her small bag tightly. The compound was buzzing with activity. Groups of men were scattered around, but to her shock, they were all white men. What struck her even more was their attire. Each of them wore skirts, colorful, flowing garments that reached their knees, paired with loose shirts. They moved with an air of confidence, laughing and chatting as if they were in a completely different part of the world. The sight was surreal, like stepping into a foreign land. Amara felt out of place, her simple clothes and timid demeanor starkly contrasting with the strange and flashy atmosphere. She hadn't taken more than a few steps when a burly man in a security uniform approached her. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" the man asked gruffly, his sharp eyes scanning her from head to toe. Amara's voice faltered. I came for the job, the house help job. Chief Uche is looking for someone." The security man frowned. "The gate was open," she replied quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude." He gestured for her to stand by the fountain as he walked away, muttering something under his breath. Amara tried to ignore the curious stares from some of the white men nearby as she waited. Their laughter and the occasional foreign words added to the feeling that she was in an entirely different world. After a few minutes, a tall, well-dressed man in a sharp navy blue suit approached her. His face was expressionless, but his tone was polite. "You're the girl looking for the house help job?" Amara nodded. "Yes, sir." "I'm Mr. Patrick, Chief Uche's personal assistant," he said. "Follow me." Amara followed him into the house, her eyes widening as she took in the grandeur of the interior. The marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and expensive furniture were unlike anything she had ever seen. The heir Patrick led her to a small waiting room and gestured for her to sit. "Chief Uche is busy at the moment, but I've informed him about you. He'll see you shortly." Amara nodded and sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could still hear the laughter of the white men outside, mingling with the faint strains of classical music playing somewhere deeper in the house. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Patrick returned. "Chief Uche is inside," he said, his tone flat. "Knock twice and then open the door." Amara hesitated, but with a deep breath, she stepped inside. The room was vast yet dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn over the windows. The only light came from a small chandelier hanging low over a polished mahogany desk. Behind the desk sat Chief Uche, or at least, that's who she assumed he was. He was nothing like she had imagined. The man before her was a dwarf, barely reaching the height of the desk as he sat on a high-backed chair. His skin was dark and leathery, his features sharp and angular. What struck Amara most were his eyes, small, piercing, and filled with an unsettling intensity. Smoke curled around his face from a thickly wrapped cigar in his hand. "Ah," he said, his voice gravelly and low. "You must be the girl looking for the job." Amara nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "Yes, sir. I'm Amara." Chief Uche leaned back in his chair, exhaling a cloud of smoke that seemed to fill the room. "Amara," he repeated, rolling the name on his tongue as if testing its weight. "Sit." She obeyed, lowering herself onto a chair in front of his desk. The leather squeaked under her weight, adding to the tension in the room. "You want the job, eh?" he said, eyeing her from head to toe. "Yes, sir," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. He chuckled, a sound that sent chills down her spine. It's simple work. Clean the house, cook, and keep everything in order. But there's one rule. Everything that happens in this house stays in this house. Do you understand? Amara hesitated. Yes, sir. The pay is very good, he continued, opening a drawer and pulling out a stack of crisp Naira notes. He held them up for her to see. Far more than you'd make anywhere else. But the job comes with responsibilities. Her eyes widened at the sight of the money, but his tone made her uneasy. What kind of responsibilities, sir? Chief Uche's lips curled into a crooked smile. He took another long drag from his cigar before answering. You'll make me happy, Amara. And part of making me happy means spending time with my dogs every night. Amara's brow furrowed in confusion. Your dogs, sir? Yes, my dogs, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. They're very special to me. Loyal, obedient, and they get lonely at night. You'll keep them company. Her stomach turned, the meaning behind his words sinking in slowly but surely. I don't understand, sir, she stammered, though she feared she already did. You will, Chief Uche said, his smile widening into something that made her skin crawl. Amara spent the night tossing and turning on the thin mattress in her mother's house. Chief Uche's words echoed in her mind, dark and unsettling. My dogs don't like to wait. She clutched Kelechi close to her chest as she thought of the money he had promised, enough to feed her son, pay off her mother's debts, and perhaps start a new life. By morning, her decision was made. Amara couldn't afford to fail her family. The following evening, Amara returned to Chief Uche's mansion. The compound was alive with activity, men moving crates of drinks, security guards patrolling, and the distant sound of music. She approached the gate, her heart pounding in her chest. The security guard recognized her and let her in without a word, though the way his eyes lingered on her made her uneasy. She was led to the same waiting room, and soon Mr. Patrick appeared. You're back, he said, his tone unreadable. Amara nodded, trying to steady her voice. Yes, I've decided to take the job. Mr. Patrick gave a curt nod and handed her a piece of paper. These are the house rules. Memorize them. Chief Uche will see you shortly. She scanned the paper, her eyes catching strange phrases like, never enter the West Wing without permission and do not ask questions about the dogs. Her unease grew, but she forced herself to stay calm. After what felt like an eternity, she was summoned into Chief Uche's office. The dwarf sat behind his desk, puffing on his ever-present cigar, his sharp eyes gleaming with satisfaction. So, you've decided to join my household, he said, leaning back in his chair. Yes, sir, Amara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Good. He slid an envelope across the desk. This is your first week's pay. Consider it a token of my appreciation for your commitment. Amara hesitated before taking the envelope. She opened it slightly, her breath catching when she saw the thick stack of Naira notes inside. It was more money than she had ever held in her life. You'll start tonight, Chief Uche said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The dogs are waiting. Amara followed Mr. Patrick to the back of the mansion, where a row of kennels lined the perimeter of the compound. The sound of barking grew louder as they approached, and Amara's stomach churned. These are Chief's prized dogs, Mr. Patrick said, gesturing to the kennels. The animals were massive, their eyes glowing unnaturally in the dim light. Their growls sent shivers down her spine. What? What do I have to do? Amara asked, her voice trembling. Just keep them company, Mr. Patrick replied, his face expressionless. They get restless at night. You'll make them happy. The first night Amara was led to the kennels felt like stepping into a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Mr. Patrick stood beside her, his cold gaze offering no comfort, as he opened the gate to the first kennel. Inside, a massive black dog with glowing yellow eyes paced restlessly, its claws scratching against the concrete floor. Its growl rumbled low, sending chills down her spine. Mara's breath caught in her throat. I don't know what to do." "You'll figure it out," Mr. Patrick replied, stepping aside. The dog stepped forward, its heavy breaths hot against her skin as it sniffed her. She froze, her knees trembling. "Relax," Mr. Patrick muttered. "They can smell fear." Amara forced herself to stay still, even as Shadow's growling grew louder. The animal's glowing eyes bore into her, and in that moment, she understood the true meaning of the chief's words. Make them happy. The hours that followed blurred into a haze of humiliation and terror. The dogs were relentless, their strength and aggression overwhelming. Amara endured it all, suppressing her screams as she reminded herself over and over, "This is for Kelechi, this is for Mama, this is for my family." When the ordeal was finally over, Amara stumbled out of the kennel, her body bruised and her spirit shattered. She collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air as tears streamed down her face. Mr. Patrick watched her with an indifferent expression. "Get used to it. You'll be doing this every night." Amara didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was too numb, her body too broken. The next morning, she returned home with her week's pay, handing over the envelope to her mother with trembling hands. "Amara, my daughter," Mama Amara exclaimed, counting the crisp Naira notes. "You are a blessing to this family. Look at all this money. God will reward you for your hard work." Amara forced a smile, nodding weakly. "Yes, Mama." Her mother didn't notice the hollow look in her eyes or the way her hands trembled. All she saw was the money, the solution to all their problems. Amara retreated to her small corner of the house, clutching Kelechi tightly. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "I'm doing this for you, my son. Only for you." But deep down, she wondered how long she could continue to sacrifice herself for a life that seemed more like a curse than a blessing. To be continued.